Okay, I've got a challenge for you, and that is to name me something better than a batch of freshly baked bread. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's hard to beat the aroma, taste, and satisfaction of baking a loaf of your very own bread at home. But sometimes this bread making process can be a bit arduous with the need for a starter or the right humidity or something else. And luckily, today's bread doesn't need any of that. It's soft, delicious, and most importantly, easy to make. This is Japanese milk bread. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode here on the channel where today I'll be putting my aggressively mediocre baking skills to use by showing you a very simple recipe for Japanese milk bread, also known as Hokkaido milk bread. Now, this bread is slightly sweet, it's soft, and it pulls apart beautifully. The whole process starts with a roux, but this probably isn't the kind of roux you're used to. This is a slightly different version that doesn't have any fat in it, known as Tangzhong. And I appreciate I'm probably butchering that name, but that is in fact what it is called. Now this roux is super important for this bread, so please don't skip this, okay? Now to make the Tangzhong, which we will henceforth call roux, you're going to want to grab yourself a skillet and drop in about a quarter cup or about 35 grams of bread flour. And before you ask if you can use all-purpose flour, the answer simply is no. Now the reason I say no and the reason that bread flour is so important here is that it has a higher protein content, which means you're going to have a higher gluten content and a stronger, stretchier dough and therefore a taller and more airy loaf of bread. So bread flour, in my opinion, is a must. Now with that cleared up, add in a quarter cup of water followed by a quarter cup of milk. I am using 2% here, but you can pretty much use whatever you like. Then grab your bluest of whisks and thoroughly mix until there are no clumps. Once smooth, transfer this to your stovetop and set to a medium-low heat and stir constantly. Trust me when I say do not step away from this because it actually comes together surprisingly quickly, and once it comes up to temp, it will only take around 3 to 4 minutes, so keep an eye on it. Now, after about 4 minutes or so, this should start to come together into this sort of tacky, pudding-like consistency, which is exactly what we're looking for. So remove it from the heat and then with your trusty spatula, scoop this all up into a ball and transfer to a bowl to let cool. So while our roux cools down, there's two things we will want to do. First is to set our oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and second is to quickly go over the rest of our ingredients. Now for the dough, you'll want to grab 2 2/3 cup, that's about 340 grams of our bread flour, 1 1/4 teaspoon, about 5 to 7 grams of active dry yeast, which you may need to activate with some sugar and warm water, just check your instructions, 2 tablespoons or 30 grams of sugar, approximately 150 mils of room temperature milk, a singular egg plus 1 more for that all-important egg wash at the end, and finally about 3 tablespoons or about 40 grams of unsalted room temperature butter, which of course I forgot to show here. Naturally, you're probably wondering what we're going to do with all these ingredients, and of course, we're going to do the easy thing, which is to throw these all into our stand mixer bowl. So grab said stand mixer bowl and drop in your flour, add in a half teaspoon or 3 grams of salt, which I definitely didn't forget to mention earlier. Give this a quick mix to combine, and then add in your yeast, followed by 2 tablespoons of sugar and 1 whole egg, along with your 150 mils of room temperature milk. Finally, drop in the all-important and crucially now cooled roux into your mixture before wandering off to your stand mixer. With the bowl locked and loaded in place and the dough hook attached, go ahead and set this to a low speed to allow the mixture to begin to combine into a rough ball. And don't be afraid to stomp this as needed to scrape off the dough hook and the sides of the bowl. After about 2 minutes or so, a shaggy ball of dough should have formed, so we're going to slowly add in our butter, about 1 tablespoon at a time, and then let this mixer do its thing. What you're looking for here is a smooth ball of dough with a robust gluten structure formed, which should take about 6 or 7 minutes of motor-assisted kneading. Once your dough is nice and smooth, drop it as gently as a summer breeze onto your table, and then begin shaping this into a taut ball. Now, you'll probably notice I'm not using any flour on the board here or on my hands, and that's because we want the dough to stick slightly to our work surface. By using this palm open, twisting, pulling motion I'm doing, the dough will pull itself into a tight ball, so that extra tackiness and stickiness is actually really going to help us create a nice taut structure. Ultimately, this should really only take a couple of minutes at most. So with a smooth ball of dough formed, grab a large bowl and slightly grease it with some oil before laying down our dough to rest for a quick nap. I recommend covering with some plastic wrap and letting it proof for at least 2 hours. Or if you've got the time, a slow proof for 24 hours in the fridge is ideal. Whichever method you choose, the dough should look something like this. Full of air pockets, light and pillowy, and of course, it should have more than doubled in size. If you don't see a lot of bubbles or activity in your dough, then I am sad to inform you that you may not have properly activated your yeast, so you may need to start over.
You tried your best, and you failed miserably. The lesson is, never try.
But I'm assuming you're a total pro and things are looking great, so drop this onto your work surface and, like the total pro you are, don't forget to add a bit of flour to prevent sticking, then quickly form this into a ball once again using that same open palm twisting pulling technique. Once the dough has attained that appropriate oblong ball-like shape, grab your knife or bench scraper and cut this into 3 even portions. Then simply roll each portion into a ball and sit back and admire your work. Beautiful. Now at this point you might be wondering, why would a loaf of bread need 3 dough balls? Surely we're not making 3 separate loaves, to which my answer is, well, sort of. But I'll get to that in a moment. For now, you'll want to take each ball and roll them out into a long rectangular shape, making sure to add flour as needed to prevent unnecessary stickage. Once you've achieved the appropriate shape, grab one end of the dough and fold it over about 1/3 of the way across, then grab the other side and fold it all the way over, creating a rather thick laminated layer. Then just roll this all out once again into a rough rectangular shape before rolling this up into what looks like a rather beefy tube-shaped croissant. This is basically mini loaf number 1. Then simply repeat this process for the other 2 remaining dough balls until everything takes on that same rolled mini loaf shape. After each dough ball is converted to its new rolled state, give them a nice cozy home next to one another in a lightly oiled loaf tin. I'm using a 9-inch tin here, but you can more or less use whatever you think will fit. Then cover with plastic wrap and set aside to proof once again for about an hour or until it's doubled in size. So 1 hour later, your mini loaves should have doubled in size, be light and pillowy, and ready for the all-important egg wash. To make that egg wash, just mix 1 egg with a splash of water or milk, and then brush the mixture generously over top. You want to make sure every inch of the surface is covered with your egg wash, as this is going to give us a beautiful golden color on the crust and just look a little bit nicer when we pull it out of the oven. Speaking of the oven, it's time to toss these into your preheated 375-degree oven for around 25 minutes. But depending on the strength of your oven, if it's convection or not, and a few other factors, just make sure you check in on this around the 15-minute mark to make sure everything is looking good. After 25 minutes has elapsed, it is time to pull out your freshly baked milk bread from the oven. You should be greeted with an amazing aroma and a crisp, light golden brown crust, which thankfully is precisely what we have achieved here, so we're looking pretty good. Each mini loaf is distinct but attached to one another and will be perfect for us to pull apart a little bit later. Yes, later. Don't cut into this immediately, okay? Let it cool completely and you will be rewarded for your patience, I promise. So after about 5 to 10 minutes, this should have cooled down enough for you to be able to handle it. So tip out the bread from its metallic home and place this onto a wire rack to allow it to continue to cool fully. You should also notice that the crust has continued to darken somewhat and you'll be left with a deeply golden brown color, which is perfect. So after about 20 to 25 agonizing minutes, your bread should be fully cooled. Meaning it's now time for the most important part of this process for any YouTube home cook, the pull apart. So get a firm grip and slowly pull one of these loaves away from the other, and yeah, you can definitely see the soft, pillowy layers here. The bread is light and springy, but still maintains a wonderful and crisp crust. It, like most other freshly baked breads, also unsurprisingly tastes amazing. And since I'm a nice guy, I'll go ahead and slice into this loaf just to give you a closer view of the crumb. And as you can see, this loaf has a wonderful density to it, but still maintains that light and bouncy texture. So that's really all there is to it. If you like to bake bread or are looking to try something a little bit different that's also simple and delicious, then I strongly recommend that you give this recipe a shot. Just don't be surprised when everyone in the house eats this within the first 48 hours, because trust me, it happens. But with all that said, folks, I just wanted to close by saying thank you so much for watching until the end of this video. As always, thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. We will see you in the next one.